In the heart of a sprawling, chaotic city where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and narrow alleys whispered stories of struggle, three young brothers, Liam, Noah, and Ethan, fought daily battles against hunger and despair. Known to locals as the Beggar Triplets, the boys were inseparable, their bond forged by years of hardship and the cruel hand life had dealt them. Abandoned at birth, they had been taken in by an elderly artist named Mr. Alden, a kind but penniless man who lived in a crumbling apartment above an old bookstore. Though he couldn't offer them much in terms of material comfort, Mr. Alden gave them something far more valuable: a love for art. Every evening, after scavenging for scraps of food or earning loose coins from passers-by, the boys would gather around Mr. Alden's tiny wooden table. There, under the dim glow of a flickering bulb, he taught them how to hold brushes, mix colors, and see the world through the eyes of an artist. He told them that even the darkest corners of life could be transformed into beauty if one looked closely enough. For Liam, the eldest triplet, painting became a way to express his quiet determination. Noah, always full of energy, used bold strokes and vibrant hues to capture movement and emotion. And Ethan, the dreamer, painted delicate details that seemed almost magical, as though he could bring his fantasies to life on canvas. But life wasn't easy for the triplets. When Mr. Alden passed away unexpectedly one cold winter night, the boys were left alone once again. With no family to turn to and no money to survive, they sold the few belongings they had inherited, including some of Mr. Alden's unfinished paintings. To their surprise, people stopped to admire the works, commenting on their uniqueness and skill. Inspired by this unexpected interest, the triplets decided to try selling their own artwork on the streets. Armed with cheap canvases and paints they bought with their meager savings, they set up shop on busy sidewalks, hoping to earn just enough to keep themselves fed. Their first attempts were met with mixed reactions. Some pedestrians paused to glance at their work, nodding appreciatively before moving on. Others ignored them completely, too caught up in their own lives to notice the talent hiding in plain sight. But the triplets didn't give up. They worked tirelessly, experimenting with different styles and techniques, pouring their hearts into every piece they created. Slowly, word began to spread about the street artists whose paintings seemed to tell stories without words. People started recognizing their passion and dedication, even if they didn't always buy their work. One sunny afternoon, while setting up near a park, the triplets noticed a woman sitting alone on a bench. She was strikingly beautiful, with long flowing hair and piercing eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Her expression was distant, as though she were lost in thought, and there was a sadness about her that intrigued the brothers. Something about her presence drew them in, compelling them to sketch her likeness. Over several days they observed her quietly, capturing subtle details: the curve of her smile, the tilt of her head, the way sunlight played across her face. It was as if she were a puzzle they wanted desperately to solve. Eventually, they decided to create a full portrait of her. Working together, they combined their individual strengths. Liam focused on the structure of her features, Noah added depth and emotion with bold shadows, and Ethan perfected the finer details, making her eyes come alive. The result was breathtaking, a masterpiece that seemed to radiate both beauty and sorrow. They titled it The Forgotten Muse and placed it prominently among their other works, curious to see how others would react. As days turned into weeks, the triplets continued to sell their paintings, eking out a modest living. Yet none of them could shake the feeling that the Forgotten Muse held a deeper meaning, as though it were waiting for someone special to discover it. Little did they know, their humble creation was destined to change not only their lives but also the life of a man who had long since buried his past, a man whose name carried power and influence, yet whose soul was weighed down by regret. Their journey was only beginning, and the threads of fate were weaving together in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The painting of the mysterious woman, the Forgotten Muse, quickly became the centerpiece of the triplets' modest collection. They set it up on their makeshift easel every morning, its haunting beauty standing out among the other pieces they had created. Passers-by often stopped to admire it, some lingering longer than others, captivated by the depth and emotion captured in her gaze. Yet despite the admiration it received, no one seemed willing to take the painting home. "It's too sad," one woman remarked, shaking her head as she walked away. "Beautiful, but not something I'd want hanging in my living room." Others simply shrugged, saying it didn't match their decor or that it felt too intense. The triplets weren't discouraged. They believed in the power of their art and trusted that the right person would eventually come along. What they didn't know was that fate had already begun spinning its web, drawing someone toward them who would change everything. Across the city, in a sleek penthouse overlooking the skyline, billionaire Adrian Blackwood sat alone in his office, staring blankly at the documents scattered across his desk. At 52 years old, Adrian was a man who had achieved everything society deemed successful: wealth beyond measure, a thriving business empire, and a reputation as one of the most powerful figures in the industry. But behind closed doors, he was haunted by regrets that gnawed at him like an unrelenting storm. For all his achievements, there was one part of his life he could never escape: the memory of Serafina, his ex-wife, the woman he had once loved more than anything in the world. Serafina had been unlike anyone Adrian had ever met. She was an artist, free-spirited and full of life, with a laugh that lit up even the darkest rooms. When they first met, Adrian had been drawn to her creativity and passion, qualities he admired but couldn't fully understand. Their marriage had started as a whirlwind romance, filled with dreams of building a future together. But as Adrian's ambitions grew, so did the distance between them. His relentless pursuit of success left little room for Serafina's needs, and over time, their relationship crumbled under the weight of his neglect. One day, without warning, Serafina disappeared. She left behind only a note explaining that she needed space to heal and find herself again. Adrian tried to reach out, hiring private investigators to track her down, but she vanished without a trace. Years passed, and though he searched tirelessly, he never found her. Eventually, he convinced himself that moving on was the only option. He threw himself into work, burying his pain beneath layers of accomplishment. But deep down, he carried the guilt of knowing he had failed the one person who had truly mattered. That afternoon, as Adrian drove through the busy streets of the city, his mind wandered back to Serafina. It happened often these days, a fleeting thought, a memory triggered by something small. This time, it was the sight of an artist sketching on the sidewalk that caught his attention. The image reminded him of Serafina, of the hours she used to spend painting in their garden. Shaking off the nostalgia, he turned his focus back to the road, until something made him slam on the brakes. There, on the corner of a bustling intersection, stood three young men surrounded by paintings. One piece in particular caught his eye, a portrait so strikingly familiar that it froze him in place. The woman in the painting looked exactly like Serafina. Her eyes, her expression, the way her hair framed her face, it was as if someone had captured her essence perfectly. Adrian's heart raced as he stepped out of his car, unable to believe what he was seeing. He approached the trio cautiously, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. The brothers barely noticed him, at first too busy arranging their display. When Adrian finally spoke, his voice was sharp, almost demanding. "Where did you get this?" he asked, pointing at the painting. The triplets exchanged confused glances. Liam, always the calmest of the three, stepped forward. "We painted it," he said simply, meeting Adrian's intense gaze with quiet confidence. Adrian frowned, disbelief etched across his face. "You painted this? How do you know her?" Noah chimed in, his tone defensive. "We don't know her. We saw her in the park a few weeks ago. She looked interesting, so we decided to paint her." Ethan added softly. "She seemed sad, like she had a story to tell." Adrian stared at them, his mind racing. Could it really be Serafina? The resemblance was uncanny, but how could these strangers have encountered her? And why did they choose to paint her? Questions swirled in his head, each one fueling his urgency to possess the painting. Without hesitation, he pulled out his wallet and offered them far more money than the painting could possibly be worth. "I'll buy it," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. The triplets hesitated, sensing that the painting meant something significant to this stranger. Money wasn't the issue. They needed it desperately, but something about the intensity in Adrian's eyes gave them pause. Finally, after a brief discussion among themselves, they agreed to sell it, though not without reservations. As Adrian handed over the cash and carefully took the painting into his possession, he felt a strange mix of emotions: hope, fear, and a flicker of excitement. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to entertain the possibility that Serafina might still be alive. If these boys had seen her recently, then maybe, just maybe, he could find her again. Little did he know, the answers he sought were closer than he imagined, and they would lead him down a path he never expected to walk. Adrian Blackwood sat in the back seat of his luxury car, clutching the painting tightly as if it might vanish into thin air. The city blurred past the tinted windows, but his focus remained fixed on the haunting image before him. Every brushstroke seemed to pulse with life, capturing not just Serafina's likeness but her very essence. The sadness in her eyes, the quiet resilience etched into her features. It was as though the triplets had reached inside her soul and pulled out something, raw and untamed. Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. There had to be a connection between those boys and Serafina, even if they claimed otherwise. Back at his penthouse, Adrian placed the painting on an easel in the center of his living room, positioning it so that the soft light from the chandelier illuminated every detail. He stood there for hours, studying it intently, searching for clues he might have missed. His mind raced with questions. Who were these boys? Why did they paint her? And most importantly, where was Serafina now? For the first time in years, Adrian felt a spark of purpose, a drive to uncover the truth no matter what it took. Determined to find answers, Adrian began his investigation discreetly. He hired a private investigator, someone he trusted implicitly, and gave him one directive: dig deep into the lives of Liam, Noah, and Ethan. At first, the information trickled in slowly. The triplets were orphans who had been raised by an elderly artist named Mr. Alden until his death several years ago. Afterward, they had survived on their own, selling paintings on the streets to make ends meet. Their story was heartbreaking yet inspiring, proof of their resilience despite overwhelming odds. But none of this explained how they came to paint Serafina, or why she looked so familiar to them. Then came the breakthrough. While sifting through old records and newspaper archives, the investigator stumbled upon a name buried in faded headlines: Serafina Blackwood. Adrian's heart skipped a beat when he saw it. The articles mentioned her disappearance decades earlier, shortly after her divorce from a prominent businessman, himself. What shocked Adrian even more was the revelation that Serafina had given birth to triplets during their marriage, a fact she had kept hidden from him. Fearing Adrian's disapproval and consumed by the pain of their crumbling relationship, she had left the babies at an orphanage, hoping they would find safety and love elsewhere. Those children were Liam, Noah, and Ethan. The realization hit Adrian like a freight train. The boys weren't just talented street artists, they were his sons, his flesh and blood. The weight of this discovery crushed him, filling him with a mixture of guilt, shame, and awe. How could he have gone so many years without knowing about them? Had Serafina truly believed he wouldn't accept them, or had she simply given up on him entirely? Either way, Adrian knew he had failed them, and her, in ways he could never undo. Despite the turmoil swirling inside him, Adrian resolved to act. He couldn't undo the past, but he could try to make amends. Knowing the boys wouldn't trust him immediately, he decided to approach them carefully. Under the guise of commissioning more artwork, he invited them to his estate for a meeting. "I'm interested in supporting young artists," he told them over the phone, his tone calm and professional. "Your work is exceptional, and I'd like to discuss potential opportunities." The triplets were skeptical. They had grown accustomed to fending for themselves and distrusted anyone who seemed too eager to help. Still, curiosity got the better of them. If nothing else, this wealthy stranger might offer them a chance to improve their circumstances. So, they agreed to visit his estate, packing a few of their best paintings to showcase. When they arrived, the opulence of Adrian's home overwhelmed them. The sprawling mansion was filled with modern art pieces, expensive furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. A servant led them to a grand sitting room where Adrian waited, standing beside an easel displaying the forgotten muse. As soon as they entered, Adrian turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he began, gesturing for them to sit. "I wanted to talk to you about your incredible talent. Your work speaks volumes, and I believe it deserves recognition beyond the streets." Liam, ever the cautious one, raised an eyebrow. "We appreciate the compliment, but we're not looking for handouts. We earn our way." Adrian nodded, respecting their independence. "I understand. That's why I want to propose something different. I'd like to sponsor an exhibition featuring your art. It'll give you exposure and open doors you might not have considered." Noah leaned forward, intrigued but wary. "Why are you doing this? You barely know us." Adrian hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Because I feel a personal connection to your work, and because I think we share more than just an appreciation for art." The brothers exchanged puzzled glances. Before they could respond, Adrian walked over to a desk and retrieved a folder. Inside were documents, birth certificates, adoption papers, and photographs of a younger Serafina holding 3 newborns in a hospital room. He handed the folder to Liam, watching as the eldest triplet flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with each new revelation. This can't be real," Liam whispered, his voice trembling. Noah and Ethan crowded around him, their faces pale with shock. They stared at the photos, recognizing fragments of themselves in the woman smiling back at them. Then they looked at Adrian, piecing together the truth. "You're our father?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Adrian nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "Yes. I didn't know about you until recently. I swear, if I had, I would have done everything differently. I let your mother down and I let all of you down. But I want to make things right if you'll let me." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The triplets processed the bombshell, their emotions ranging from anger to disbelief to a flicker of hope. They had spent their entire lives believing they were alone in the world, unwanted and forgotten. Now, here was a man claiming to be their father, offering them a place in his life. It was almost too much to comprehend. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice steady but laced with caution. "If you're serious about making things right, then prove it. Actions speak louder than words." Adrian nodded solemnly. "You have my word. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust." The road ahead wouldn't be easy, for any of them, but the seeds of reconciliation had been planted. As the triplets left the estate that evening, their minds buzzed with conflicting thoughts. They didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: their lives would never be the same again. The days that followed Adrian's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions for both him and the triplets. For Liam, Noah, and Ethan, the discovery of their father's identity was like stepping into uncharted territory. They had spent their entire lives believing they were abandoned by everyone, including their biological parents. Now here was Adrian Blackwood, a man whose name they vaguely recognized from news headlines, claiming to be their father and promising to make amends. But trust wasn't something they handed out easily. Years of surviving on the streets had taught them to rely only on themselves, and the idea of letting someone else into their lives felt foreign, even dangerous. Adrian, on the other hand, was consumed by guilt and determination. He couldn't erase the mistakes of his past, but he was determined not to repeat them. Every morning he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, to rebuild what he had broken, not just for himself but for his sons. Yet, he knew it wouldn't be easy. The triplets had every right to resent him, and earning their trust would require patience, consistency, and genuine effort. He began by making small gestures, sending them resources to improve their art studio, ensuring they had access to quality paints and canvases, and offering financial support without strings attached. At first, the brothers hesitated to accept these gifts, unsure of Adrian's intentions. But when they saw how much it meant to him, and how sincerely he seemed to want to help, they slowly started to let their guard down. One evening, Adrian invited the triplets to dinner at his penthouse. It was an awkward affair, filled with long silences and cautious glances. Adrian tried to break the ice by asking about their artistic process, hoping to connect over their shared passion for painting. "Your work is extraordinary," he said, gesturing to a landscape piece Ethan had brought along. "You have your mother's talent." At the mention of Serafina, the room fell silent. The boys exchanged wary looks before Liam finally spoke. "Why did she leave us?" he asked bluntly, his voice tinged with both anger and sadness. "If she loved us, why didn't she keep us?" Adrian sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. "She loved you more than anything," he said softly. "But I failed her. I pushed her away, ignored her needs, and made her feel like she wasn't enough. When she left, she thought she was protecting you, from me, from my world, from everything. She believed would hurt you. She wanted you to grow up safe and happy, far from the chaos we created." Noah frowned, clearly struggling to process this information. "So, you're saying Mom gave us up because she thought you wouldn't accept us? That doesn't make sense. Even if things weren't perfect between you two, she could have fought for us." "You're right," Adrian admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "She should have fought for you, and so should I, but neither of us did. And now all I can do is try to fix what I broke, for her sake and for yours." The conversation didn't resolve everything, it couldn't, but it marked the beginning of a fragile understanding. Over time, Adrian continued reaching out, inviting the triplets to events, exhibitions, and family gatherings. He introduced them to influential figures in the art world, helping them gain exposure while respecting their independence. Despite their initial resistance, the brothers began to see glimpses of sincerity in Adrian's actions. Slowly, tentatively, they started opening up to him, sharing stories about their childhood and the challenges they faced growing up. As the bond between father and sons grew stronger, Adrian also found himself revisiting memories of Serafina. He realized that honoring her legacy meant more than simply acknowledging her absence. It meant keeping her spirit alive in meaningful ways. Inspired by this realization, he proposed an idea to the triplets: opening an art gallery dedicated to undiscovered talents, especially those who came from difficult backgrounds. "It'll be a tribute to your mother," he explained one afternoon as they sat together in his study. "A place where people like you, artists with raw talent and untapped potential, can showcase their work and inspire others." The triplets were skeptical at first, wondering if this was just another attempt by Adrian to buy their forgiveness. But when they saw the genuine excitement in his eyes and heard the passion in his voice, they agreed to collaborate. Together, they worked tirelessly to bring the project to life, combining Adrian's business acumen with the brothers' creative vision. They named the gallery Serafina's Canvas, a nod to the woman who had shaped their lives in ways none of them fully understood. The grand opening of Serafina's Canvas was a turning point for everyone involved. Hundreds of people attended the event, marveling at the stunning artwork displayed throughout the space. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a special section devoted entirely to Serafina's paintings, pieces Adrian had painstakingly tracked down over the years, piecing together fragments of her artistic journey. Standing beside the triplets, as they unveiled the gallery, Adrian felt a profound sense of pride, not just in his sons, but in the woman who had inspired them all. For Liam, Noah, and Ethan, the experience was transformative. Not only did they find validation as artists, but they also discovered a deeper connection to their mother through her work. As they walked through the gallery, they noticed recurring themes in her paintings: resilience, hope, and an unwavering belief in the beauty of life. These were qualities they recognized in themselves, traits they had inherited from her. In that moment, they felt closer to Serafina than ever before, as if she were standing beside them, guiding them forward. Adrian watched his sons interact with guests, their confidence shining brightly despite their humble beginnings. He realized that redemption wasn't about erasing the past or undoing his mistakes. It was about creating something new, something beautiful, out of the wreckage. By embracing his role as a father and honoring Serafina's memory, he had taken the first steps toward healing wounds that had festered for decades. Though challenges still lay ahead, the foundation for a new chapter had been laid. Adrian, Liam, Noah, and Ethan were no longer strangers bound by blood. They were a family, united by love, art, and the enduring legacy of a woman who had once dreamed of a better future for them all. Months passed, and the bond between Adrian and his sons continued to grow, though it wasn't without its challenges. Trust, they quickly learned, was not something that could be rebuilt overnight. The triplets still carried scars from their childhood. Years of abandonment, hunger, and uncertainty had left an indelible mark on their hearts. While they appreciated Adrian's efforts, there were moments when old wounds resurfaced, making them question whether he truly understood the depth of what they had endured. Adrian, for his part, was patient. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he was determined to prove himself in the present. Every interaction with Liam, Noah, and Ethan became an opportunity to show them that he was different now, that he was willing to listen, learn, and grow alongside them. He attended their art shows, cheered them on during interviews, and even joined them in painting sessions at the gallery. At first, these moments felt awkward, as though they were all playing roles in a story none of them fully understood. But over time, laughter replaced tension, and shared silences became comfortable rather than strained. One day, while helping organize an exhibition at Serafina's canvas, Adrian stumbled upon a box of old photographs tucked away in a storage room. Inside were images of Serafina, some from her youth, others taken during happier times in their marriage. Among them was a faded Polaroid of her holding the triplets as newborns, her face glowing with love and exhaustion. Adrian stared at the photo for a long time, overwhelmed by the weight of what he had missed. That evening he showed the picture to the boys, hoping it might bring them closer to the mother they barely remembered. Ethan, the most sensitive of the three, traced the edges of the photograph with trembling fingers. "She looks so happy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Liam nodded silently while Noah clenched his jaw, fighting back tears. For the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine what life might have been like if Serafina had stayed. If she had fought harder for them, and if Adrian had been the father they needed him to be. The conversation that followed was raw and honest. Adrian apologized again, this time not just for failing Serafina, but for leaving her children to fend for themselves. "I can never make up for what I've done," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But I want you to know that I see you now, all of you, and I'm proud of the men you've become." To Adrian's surprise, the triplets didn't respond with anger or bitterness. Instead, they thanked him for trying, for acknowledging his mistakes, and for giving them a chance to build something new together. It was a small step, but it marked a turning point in their relationship. From that day forward, the walls between them began to crumble, brick by brick, until what remained was a fragile yet unshakable connection. As the months turned into years, the Blackwood family found ways to honor Serafina's memory beyond the gallery. They established a scholarship fund for underprivileged artists, ensuring that young talents like Liam, Noah, and Ethan would have opportunities they might otherwise miss. They also hosted annual art workshops in local communities, inviting aspiring painters to share their stories and dreams. Through these initiatives, the brothers discovered a sense of purpose they had never known before, one rooted not in wealth or fame, but in the joy of creating and uplifting others. For Adrian, watching his sons thrive filled a void he hadn't realized existed. His once empty penthouse became a home filled with laughter, debate, and the occasional chaos of collaborative art projects. The triplets, in turn, found comfort in knowing they finally belonged somewhere, not because of Adrian's money or influence, but because of the genuine love and respect they shared. One particularly poignant moment came during the 3rd anniversary of Serafina's canvas. The gallery had grown into a cultural landmark, attracting visitors from around the world. On this special occasion, Adrian gathered the triplets on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city skyline. Each of them held a glass of sparkling cider, raised in celebration of how far they had come. "I never thought I'd say this," Adrian began, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I'm grateful for everything that brought us here. Even the pain. Without it, I wouldn't have found you. And without you, I wouldn't have rediscovered who I am." Liam smiled faintly, raising his glass. "We've come a long way, haven't we? From street corners to galleries, from strangers to family," Noah chimed in, his usual energy softened by sincerity. "Yeah, and we're just getting started. There's still so much more we can do, together." Ethan, ever the dreamer, looked out at the horizon. "Mom would have loved this," he said quietly. "She always believed in beauty rising from brokenness. Maybe that's why she painted the way she did, with hope hidden beneath every shadow." They stood there for a while, savoring the moment, their differences no longer dividing them but weaving them together into a tapestry of resilience, forgiveness, and love. In honoring Serafina's legacy, they had created something extraordinary. A family built not on perfection but on the courage to start anew. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the city, Adrian realized that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about finding beauty in the present and building a future worth remembering.